Influencer marketing is becoming new, where there's a lot of, so people say they're influencers, people say they're marketers, but to actually to know how to market to influencers is becoming a really new skill that not a lot of companies have, and we're starting to build job families for that, like how to do influencer marketing.
So individuals that have built out brand equity, kind of social capital, being able to market to those category of customers.
Correct. So someone who's acting as the middleman between that person and a company is now becoming a new job family.
Ah. Daniel, thank you so very much for taking your time to join me here today at The Rosie Effect.
Thank you for having me. This is so great.
Yay! So, it's funny how I found you on TikTok. Yes, I'm on TikTok. And I just realized what you were sharing was super valuable in the sense of now individuals are either trying to figure out how do I grow my career in tech or how do I get into tech? And so, starting off with that question and your journey as to how you got into tech within the HR space, why don't you give me a bit of a highlight on who Daniel's all about and how he's built his career within tech HR?
Sure. So I was like everyone else. I was sold on the American dream that like college, you go to college, and once you go to college, like it's this magical gate, and it's like, oh, here's all the opportunities, but it's really not. Like, and so I made the mistake of studying classical music, saxophone performance, which is about
Oh,
as
did
marketable
you?
as you think. Yeah, and I'm not that great, so so I graduated with this degree, and I was like, oh, now I have to get a real job. And then that's when that's when I started doing the job search, and that's when I kind of learned about corporate America. I learned more from Dilbert comics about what jobs were versus like the 4-year degree. And so as I was doing
Oh.
like all of these interviews, I ended up getting an HR assistant role as my first job out of college. And then I really liked the field of HR. I went back and got my master's in HR. I went into WebMD, which was, I guess, my first hybrid of kind of like, it was advertising, it was media, as well as tech. And then that was when the HR business partner role really exploded as related to having an HR person be very familiar with the business to drive a talent strategy. And from there, I went to EA Games. I did some consulting with some of the FANGs for tech. And then I was an HR business partner for Spotify. Now I'm a consultant for 2 tech companies.
Wow. Wow. So I guess the question, because that's what I think a lot of people are today, in the sense of they might have a differing background and they're wondering, how do I get in now? Right. You did an amazing transition in figuring out sort of the elements, understanding different things through your own interest and realizing, like, wait a second, the traditional path they taught me is not what the reality is. So today, as individuals stand from folks that have lost their jobs, folks that are looking for new opportunity, how should they be rethinking the way you thought about it when you began your career in the now so they can be well positioned to get those amazing roles in tech?
So I think one of the things that right now candidates and everyone has an unprecedented opportunity that they're not taking advantage of, which is that the whole world is open. So right now, for instance, I'm trying to, there's several people that I coach and several like friends and people that I'm working with that I can't find a job within San Francisco. I can't find a good product manager. I'm like, well, have you looked in Des Moines, Iowa? Because they're looking, and based on the fact that everything is
Move.
remote.
Okay.
And so now and when you look on like LinkedIn and you find these really low applicants pools and you find these jobs that no one is applying to, but that you have the skill set, but are now, very, very open to doing remote work. The salary may be different as relates between New York City and like Des Moines or Kansas City. But
Middle
if you look
America.
at
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
cities, like that's actually a really good opportunity. Right now, it's a phenomenal opportunity just based on the fact that the whole world is open season. So if you just kind of update your resume a little bit, update some of your searches a little bit, you can actually find a lot of opportunity if you try to focus on remote work.
Now let's think about how we take our current roles and create transferable skills for roles in tech. Because folks might just be like, what does a PM mean? What does all these different things mean? And they might not be deep technical folks. Like, I don't even consider myself a deep technical person. I thrive in the people side of the business and understand the technical enough to be able to connect to the end consumer. And so how can folks be thinking about the skills that they have and sort of connecting the dots to opportunities in tech?
So I think if you can speak tech, that I mean, and tech is one thing as a job family, and then there's like tech as an industry.
Mhm.
So if you're interested in joining a tech company, the idea is just to make sure that you understand the technology for it, and that you can be the business side of tech, but you have to do the due diligence. You have to understand what it is that it does.
Right.
And you have to be able to package that, because all companies care less and less and less about the certification from a 4-year degree saying I studied anthropology and rocks and clouds and I know what happened in the Byzantine Empire, versus, hey, I did marketing for a tech company. I know how to do HR for a tech company. I know how to do finance for a tech company. Like, if you just remove kind of the industry and just focus on the fact that it is an income generating machine,
Mm-hmm.
you can then apply your skills to it.
So right now, what kind of level are you recruiting for, and what are you seeing as like common mistakes across the board, or that you've seen across the different tech companies that you've been with?
I see the big mistake I see is a little bit of the what I would call like the FANG elitism. So like the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, because they're the silent M in that group, in which people are saying, if I don't get one of those jobs, I'm not good enough. And that's really just, I want to stamp that out. You can be an amazing software engineer for a pudding company, for a health insurance company, for a pharmaceutical company, for a nonprofit, for a furniture company. Like all of these other industries, you can still be just as good as an engineer.
Yeah.
If you go and work for a FANG and you get accepted into a FANG, great, that's amazing. You should be proud
Mhm,
of that, because that's
mhm.
a very highly distinguishable role. But you should not think of yourself as less or more because of your ability to get a job or not get a job within that. That is the
I
one big thing that I'm trying to do, especially at the more junior levels within software engineers.
Mhm, mhm. And people are sleeping on opportunity, and just, the opportunity to make money in roles that don't fall under the bigger companies, because the company still needs to figure out how they're going to continue on their technology journey, especially in the now. Companies need to figure out, how do we get our products at the forefront of customers? So needing the right skill set, needing the right folks that can take those kind of roles is really vital. And you're right, sometimes we could be blinded by those big names, and it's like, if it's not that, then we failed, or we haven't really achieved anything.
Right.
Wow. So once an individual is able to work their way, they get that job. What does the process of negotiations look like? We've always been advised that, hey, don't start the discussion at the beginning of the interview process, because you don't even know where that's going to go. But you go through whatever levels of interview process, you're able to achieve it, you hit it on, you got that job. Now what? How do I hit it to make sure that I'm tapping into the highest level, the highest revenue, whatever the package looks like? Give me a sense of what negotiation needs to, I need to be rethinking it so I'm getting the best bang for my buck.
Absolutely. So I think, and this is, again, this is something we don't ever teach. All of us within like the Gen X and kind of like the Gen X to the millennials, we figured it out almost by proxy and almost
Yeah.
by like by trial and error. And only
Same
as we're
here.
becoming more self-aware, we're like, oh, wait a minute, this is how this works. So
Exactly.
there's things like, as we talk about compensation, there's all sorts of factors. There's industry, there's location, there's size of the company, as well as the one thing that I think people a lot of miss is what I call job alignment, which is, how does that industry like that job? Because companies have the ability to pay more and pay premiums for positions that it considers to be more valuable. So, in 2010, like everything exploded within data science. So everything within data science came with a price tag. And over the last few years, it came with machine learning. So if you find a job family that does really well, but then you find industry alignment where the industry says, oh, wow, we really like this role, like that's where the sweet spot is. So be either a high level individual contributor or manager. Those typically, the higher up you are, like the triangle of compensation is higher level,
Mhm.
in a good, well-paying job family in an industry that values that job family. And those three is where you'll find like the best sweet spot as it relates to compensation.
So where would you say an opportunity with industry, or job role lies right now as we move into this new phase of digital need and technology?
So I would say, if you can just kind of watch the market a little bit and just see what's happening, that's where you'll find the opportunities. So for right now, like I know streaming services both hit a boom. I know entertainment is shaky as a whole, but streaming services hit a boom. Home, anything dealing with home purchases hit a huge boom, like better.com, mortgages. And then you think through what the next steps. Okay, after someone buys a house, what's next? Okay, insurance. And then insurance hit a boom, home furnishings hit a boom. Like all of these and all of those industries are starting to see an increase. Going into hospitality, going into travel is going to be a little bit risky right now. Any kind of event management is going to be risky. But if you try to follow the market, you'll see it's not as though the money went away. It's just distributed differently right now. And right now, streaming services, entertainment, home, mortgages, as well as logistics and supply chain, pharmaceuticals are all doing really well.
Healthcare, hospitals, operational systems, how are we navigating patient flow through, output, all of that. Fascinating. So what are areas that are not sexy that folks need to be looking at?
So I would say like benefits and HR for benefits is like that's like the secret back door. If you do benefits, compliance, FMLA, like all these federal leaves that companies have to adhere by, so they need someone who does this. And there's always roles for that. QA kind of fell a little bit by the wayside. I would say like influencer marketing is becoming new, where there's a lot of, so people say they're influencers, people say they're marketers. But to actually, to know how to market to influencers is becoming a really new skill that not a lot of companies have. And we're starting to build job families for that, like how to do influencer marketing.
So individuals that have built out brand equity, kind of social capital, being able to market to those category of customers.
Correct. So someone who's acting as the middleman between that person and a company is now becoming a new job family.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Very fascinating. So for example, like when we in HR, like we have access to tens of thousands of different job families. And we just take a look at industry wide as we look at all of our market research and whatnot. And marketing now has a new category called influencer marketing. And it's how do you utilize influencers? Because you as a marketing department can't do what an influencer does. So now you have to build a relationship with that person, but now that's a job family. So you work for the company, but how do you build that job family? And it's coming up with different things that person does, how they're measured on success, how the company will pay them for it. So it's kind of exciting when we see new job families, but influencer marketing is a new one that not a lot of people know. But it's becoming hot. So I think anything regarding influencer marketing, anything regarding the generational, so now the generational shift has happened.
It is.
There's a lot of analytics now so I'm very sorry to millennials, but now no one cares about you anymore. They've tossed you in with Gen X, and now everyone's focused on Gen Z because they have now graduated. So now it's their budget. So anyone that can do any kind of analytics on spending behavior and patterns and trends for Gen Z is going to be huge.
Okay.
Right now, anything with data analytics research is exploding. It's been exploding for the last few years, and in all fields, marketing, HR, finance, no matter what it is, if you can do analytics and data, you're going to be set.
Someone is currently in a role right now. I did a little asking my social media on throwing a couple questions, and so I have a couple for you. How they've heard that in order to basically up their game and increase their revenue, they're better off finding another role externally and moving to that new job basically in order to get a higher salary versus trying to figure out how to negotiate or move on to a new level within the organization. What's your take on that?
That's typically something that happens. I think the companies' best interest, what we try to do from an HR perspective is we want to set limits just to say, okay, so everyone who gets promoted, like we have a cap, and this is just to make sure that everyone is treated consistently and fairly. But in many cases, that's below market and it's below the market value. And so HR, especially with compensation, and we're very self-aware of the fact we're like, oh my God, like we're not doing this anywhere near justice. But at the same time, how do we make sure that we're doing this in a fair way? So companies are still trying to figure that out. I've seen a lot of companies start to try to be much more aggressive as it relates to promotion. I typically tell people, give it a year. If you have 1 year, now you have that experience on your resume. Now you can say, I have done this work. If your company does not match it, now you can go to the market and say, okay, my company can't match this. I know that the industry market will. But I would say just having really open conversations, don't threaten to leave, of course, but just to ask HR, ask your manager, am I being paid to market value? And I really want to remove all the stigma of compensation conversations. Am I being paid fair to market? When was the last time this was reviewed? Let's remove the anxiety on both sides. This is a business conversation.
You want employees to have these conversations with their leadership.
Absolutely. And that's where, and I tell employees all the time, you can talk to each other, but in many cases you lie to each other and you forget your salaries. The ideal state would be that you can talk to your manager and that your manager can say, hey, you are paid this much against the midpoint. This is based on your performance. I want to get you up here. Do you agree with that? And okay, let's just remove all the negative stigma to it because this is a business cost. You do something for the company should pay you for it. If you're now doing more work, the company should pay you more.
Mhm, 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 mhm. This though gets me into the conversation of diversity, inclusion, and equity in the industry, specifically tech, because I'm in it. I see it. We say that we're unicorns, and that's literally facts. Being a Black woman in tech, and so when the conversation around the equity that you bring to the marketplace, is it the same for someone like me to be able to have those kind of conversations? And how should we be navigating that in a space where it doesn't look like it's built or created for individuals of color to be well positioned to flourish?
Absolutely. And so this is something I really appreciated both within EA Games and Spotify, that we were very, very public with the thought that we were like, okay, let's look at salary and let's look at it with gender. Let's look at it against ethnicity, and let's look to see if we have any gaps, and let's fix those gaps to see if we can make sure that we're taking care of any unconscious bias. So a lot of tech companies are doing that proactively. But I think the big thing, just it comes at every level. It has to start with education. It starts with community, but also now corporations have to say, okay, wait a minute. We're now the ones with the money. This is we're the ones that have the ability to give life to people. Now we also have to take a look at our processes and make sure that they are fair, and make sure that our pipelines are fair, and make sure that we're training white managers who have never managed a Black or African American employee. Are you comfortable with the terms? You know what this is like. You can't treat them separate but equal. Like, you have to be able to acknowledge that there's a difference.
Facts, though.
Not,
Facts.
like, you can't just be like, and in a lot of the coaching and trainings that I've done with managers, it's where I've encouraged them to be honest, and they're like, I don't know how to treat. I have this Black employee, and I do I say it's Black? Do I say it's African? I'm like, this is good. This is the conversation, because guess what? Like, they're not a universal monolith. Like, you can speak with her or him and acknowledge that there's a difference, acknowledge that there's something there, and acknowledge then how that person would need to be developed so that you are treating them just as fairly as the people that look like you.
Hmm. I was speaking to a business leader the other day in an interview, and she was describing how, top leadership will have the great vision of bringing in diversity. They see the value to the business, they see the need in a changing economy where the consumer base is becoming much more diverse. But when you look at it 3 levels deep, where decision makers, higher level managers are not implementing that, I'm hearing that you did trainings to that. So, where did you see the greatest challenge, and how? Because the foundational question I'm trying to get to is, a lot of organizations have signed pledges, have come out. Yes, we supported all X, Y, and Z, but this is generational. It's been going on, right? So when does the conversation switch to implementation, and what exactly needs to happen?
So I think it needs to happen on both sides, but really the big focus as it relates to the corporations in regards to, one, making sure the job descriptions are, like, I'm very, very adamant on the bachelor's as a gatekeeping of a job description. If someone has the skill, if someone has 6 months of SEO experience, I will hire them over someone who has a 4-year marketing degree, because they have the skill and the ability to do that job.
Hmm.
As it relates to building pipelines, it's just making sure that the job descriptions are good. It's making sure that the reach out from the recruiting pipeline is good, so that it's not just the same people. Like, are we looking within things like Black Girls Code? Are we looking at other diverse groups? Are we making sure that we can talk to someone who may not have a bachelor's degree, but says, I've done this work and I've done something like this, and it could be through, like, just an alternative way and not just through that path. So I think it really is on the corporations in terms of making sure the job descriptions are kind of scrubbed, as well as the recruiting processes are free from that unconscious bias.
Hmm. I'm interested to hear your perspective on this article that I read recently, and could go either way. But the article basically was talking about putting leadership sort of compensation tied to bringing in diverse leaders into the organization. What's your take on that?
If it drives the right behavior, good. But I of course, I'm an idealist, so it would be like, this should happen naturally. You should not have to get paid to
In
do the right
order to
thing.
be able to do that. Right,
But
right.
if so of course, like, my ideal in the clouds versus, hey, but this is actually impacting people's lives. You know what? For especially, like, for, I'd say, some of the banks, some of the ones that are more, much more of the older generations that do a lot of the word speak but don't actually action it.
Yep.
If you tie something related to money with it, yes, absolutely. If it can help make impact. What I'm seeing more and more is that as the generations start to shift, and as I'm seeing Generation X and as millennials start to take over the executive spaces, they're much more empathetic and they think about this much more. They remember what this was like, and they're thinking in these ways, which is great. Now it's just about implementation. But the idea of tying money to it just feels gross to me because it shouldn't be that way. But if that's the way it helps people find to wake people up.
Wow. Wow. So what's next? What's next for Daniel? You're building quite a following now on social platforms. Clearly, there's a need to educate individuals on how to set themselves for success and coming into tech. What does the next opportunity look like for you?
Right now I am I love this whole TikTok thing. I've never thought that this would be a thing. I only joined it because people were giving bad advice that were going to harm people's chances. And as someone in HR, I'm like, oh my God, like, you can give, I don't care about the influencer advice. Oh, smile, do this, do this. Yeah, that's great. But so I watched a TikTok where someone said, if you do this, do this. And I was like, oh my God, no, don't do that. And so I started making
Give me
videos.
an example of bad advice.
Oh, like someone said, if the recruiter says, what salary are you looking for? The person said, don't answer the question. And I was like, don't do that. What? They're like, no, no, no. Like, and because I'm remembering now where at my companies where the recruiter's like, oh, the candidate just refused to ask the question. I'm like, all right, just pass on them. Like that hurts candidates' chances.
Ah,
I mean, and a lot of my things as it relates to the videos I make on TikTok is like, when you take advice, remember the difference between point of view advice and systemic advice. And if you ever go for career advice, talk to someone in HR because we look at things systemically. Like we're looking across the board. I know thousands of different job families. I've built workforce planning models. I built compensation models. If you talk to like a product manager, an engineering manager, you're going to get, hey, this is what worked for me in this one isolated incident. But if you take this advice, it actually might damage your chances because here's this one little thing that worked for me, but here's all these other variables I didn't know about.
so what will they do instead? Kind of give us a range or talk around what the market is kind of paying?
So I always tell candidates, don't use Glassdoor, don't use things like the market because the company has access to so much more information than the employees do. And they pay a lot for it. And you have to like participate in these market surveys to get it. But instead focus on you and your value. So if you say to a company, this is my range, always talk about a range, don't give a number. This is
Right.
my range. And then you follow up and say, how does that match against the range of the position? In most cases, like recruiters and hiring managers, they're not your enemy. Like we one of the big things that I want to dissipate is like studies have shown and HR has shown, like
Yeah.
if someone is excited to join the company, they're going to do well. And how do people get excited with money? Give them more money than what they want. Like if we can give a good offer more than what you wanted, that's great. Then you join, you're excited, that's awesome. And of course, human beings can never be happy, so it only lasts for 3 to 6 months. But we'll take that. So the idea of just let's remove all of the anxiety from this. Companies are not looking to lowball you. Companies are looking to pay based on value. So if you go into that conversation nervous, then you're already off on the wrong step. Go into it as a business expense and say, this is my ideal range. How does that match against the range of the position? And if you ask the recruiter these questions, you'll find that their guard kind of lowers and they'll be able to speak with you much more kind of candidly. Okay, I think the range is this. We've hired normally at this rate. The recruiter's being paid to bring talent and they think you can do the job. They just want to make sure that the offer that they make you is fair, equitable, it excites you, and it does not cause disparate impact to the team as is.
My last question is about overcoming that fear because I mentor a lot of some of my girlfriends who get that job and then they come back to me like I didn't negotiate. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't negotiate? Right. And I think it might, there's a lot of stuff that's out in the marketplace in terms of women and us not seeing our value in the marketplace. So what is your advice to that in this new world that we're going forward? I hear a lot of value. How do we position that, or what else do we need to be thinking about that so that when we come into these instances where we've worked so hard getting this job, we know we're worth it. How do we then, translate that into the revenue that we're getting?
So that's such a good point. And that's where I tell people, like, stop talking about Glassdoor, stop talking about your coworkers, talk about you and what you bring, because the business is a revenue generating entity. It doesn't care about all of these other things. But if you say, if you hire me, I can do this, this, and this. I can bring you a new way to do SEO. I can bring you brand information. I can bring you a new way to do HR. I can bring you an SAP model. I can bring you this. I can bring you this. Talk about that. That is a business case. And then so if what I tell people, like the secret to real negotiations is if you reflect on the interview And if you can call something from the interview and say, based on the interview, you had presented that you have this problem. I have this way of solutioning it. You don't have this thing. I have it. I have this competency. Therefore, I am requesting a change to the salary because I know I can do this. Then it removes everything. It's a business. Okay. Then it just fills all the dots. That is the best way to negotiate. Don't, oh my God, ignore all of these like salary negotiation 101, because that's like the negotiation tactics is one person buy low, one person sells high, but that's not the case.
Yeah, someone has to lose, someone has to win. Yeah.
Yes. And what the company really wants is the company wants both sides to win. They want you to come in and generate revenue. They're not looking to save on, like, you cost 2 to 3 times as much as your salary. So they're not looking to kind of like shaft you a few $1,000 on the salary. Like, they're like, okay, what's fair? What is the range that will pay you fair, that will get you excited to work, that'll make you feel like you're well compensated, so you're not thinking about money, you're thinking instead about work. That's really where the sweet spot is for most companies.
It almost sounds like maybe even remove yourself from the equation if you're that kind of nervous about it, and look at it from a specific skill set and value that you bring to the marketplace. Absolutely. And hone in on specifically that, because they're hiring you for a reason. You've gotten to the point where you've gone through all these crazy interviews, and now clearly you are the right person for the job. So this skill set is the right person for the job. Therefore, align that with what you believe your income needs to be. Wow.
Absolutely. And if the company is making you an offer, then they're not going to all of a sudden rescind the offer because you say, can we talk about the salary?
That part, I think there might be a fear with that, as in like, oh, if I don't say yes, or if I don't respond right away, right, they might just pull the offer and everything I've worked goes.
No, the company wants you. So that's your cue to negotiate. And the worst, as long as you're professional with it, and I've seen the worst case negotiations are people that say, well, I wanted this, or the market pays this. I'm like, oh God, that's because I'm the person that approves the counter offers. Like, it's the HRBP that about like, and I'm like, okay, you don't have any market value, and it's not your fault. You don't know any market information. I just happen to have access that you don't. But you can't talk about Glassdoor to me because I know that's totally unverified data, or the fact that you wanted this is not good. But if you say, hey, remember in my interview when you spoke about the fact that you have this problem? I have this skill. I have this competency. I can bring this perspective, which will help. Oh, wow. Yes. Okay, good. That is a business case. Then yes, we should negotiate over here.
Wow, that's gold. That's gold. Daniel, thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate this. And thank you once again for taking your time to join us over here at The Rosie Effect.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks for everything.
Absolutely. Bye-bye now.